Welcome back to 21 This Week. In the last few weeks, the 2023 Maryland legislature adjourned. This was the first General Assembly for Governor Wes Moore, and this wouldn't be a talking head show if we didn't try and handicap the politics and focus on the winners and losers. Maricé, you've had experience in Annapolis as a delegate. Who do you think the winners and losers were?
Absolutely, and it's bittersweet because I definitely miss my time in the legislature. But I've also am so proud to see some of the changes that were, even when I was still there, we were pushing through. I would say that Delegate C.T. Wilson from Charles County finally got the extension of the statute of limitations for child victims of sexual assault. And I think it was a long time coming. I believe it's been at least 15 to 20 years that he's been kind of pushing for this. And other than that, I would say Governor Moore really got through some of his administration's priorities. Although there were some glitches with some of the appointments, which is to be expected by any kind of brand new governor. I would also say that Ben Barnes, as his first time chair of appropriations, did really well. And I know that in the Senate we had Senator Melanie Griffith also as the new chair of finance, and being a woman of color, I think that is wonderful to see her standing out in that. And lastly, I would say Senator Feldman in the brand new committee dealing with education and environment. So it's just been really great to see. I would say in general, I think all of Marylanders are winners just seeing the progressive legislation that's been passed.
Well, Laurie, you may have a slightly different point of view, and that's why this is a show that we go back and forth. What are the bills that you think should have passed and didn't, and what are the bills that shouldn't have and did?
Should have passed that didn't. I would say the biggest one is SB 1, which was the firearms bill, where overwhelmingly the people who testified were against this bill, yet it still passed, and it flies in the face of a Supreme Court justice ruling. So I'm sure that it'll go to the Supreme Court, and in the end will be proving all of the delegates who voted for it to be wrong and to be voting against what they're supposed to be following the Maryland Constitution and the U.S. Constitution, and they obviously didn't, because now it's be harder for people to take their firearms outside of their home. And another bill would be there's a couple transgenders bills that passed that actually I talked about one of them in another 21 This Week show that actually give transgenders more rights than people who are not transgenders, because Medicaid will allow for more things than for transgenders than for non-transgenders. It'll also allow transgenders to go to the jail of their sexual identity. So that is something that has changed. Something that should have passed that didn't was, I would say, Kathy Szeliga's bill about women in sports. Instead, transgenders will still be allowed to compete against women in sports, and that is just not right. So that's my summation.
So, Maricé, when you look back in the future, what do you think this year's General Assembly will be most remembered for?
I would say for many human rights issues, I think we will be remembered for the reproductive health care bills, in addition to extending health coverage for our transgender Marylanders, and obviously cannabis. I think that Governor Moore is able to take the credit for a lot of things, but just to kind of also just bring in the narrative of the legislature really pushing for these things. I would say every legislative session, but really seeing those bills come into fruition and seeing it being more mainstream. So just knowing from the body, like Delegate C.T. Wilson is actually one of the more conservative Democrats. And so seeing him kind of leading some of these issues, it really kind of tells you the environment that we're in Annapolis. And that one, it's I know for our Republican Marylanders, I understand that they will disagree with me, and that's okay. But I would just say that it's balanced in that even within the Democratic majority, there's not like an abuse of power. Basically, we try to bring in all of the different perspectives into the legislation that passed for the benefit of all of Maryland.
So it's interesting, one of the one of the areas that we didn't talk about were some of the environmental changes, some of which are coming down the road of obviously there was an administrative change, but reflected also in legislation banning the use of gas-used powered cars that comes up in the future. So that may be another topic that we talk about well into the future.